He laughed during the hearing, until the judge revealed a truth hidden for years. Michael Johnson couldn't stop laughing. There, in the Chicago courtroom, as his ex-wife Jennifer detailed into the microphone the reasons she deserved half of everything he had built, he simply couldn't take it seriously. It was a nervous, loud laugh that echoed off the dark wooden walls of the courtroom. Jennifer paused with each of his outbursts, her eyes filling with tears of anger and humiliation. But Michael didn't stop. The more she spoke about their 15-year marriage, about how he had neglected her, about how he had hidden assets, the harder he laughed. Attorney David, his lawyer, discreetly nudged his arm, trying to get him to stop. The court staff exchanged uncomfortable glances, but the one watching most intently was Judge Rebecca Taylor, a woman in her 40s with brown hair pulled into a tight bun, who never took her eyes off him. "Mr. Johnson," said the judge, lightly tapping her gavel on the desk, "I ask that you maintain decorum during this hearing." Michael tried to control himself, but when Jennifer started talking again about the construction company he had built from scratch, about how she deserved recognition for having sacrificed her career to support him, he burst into laughter once more. "Sorry, Your Honor," he said, wiping the tears from his eyes. "It's just so funny. She wants half of something I built alone, working 16-hour days, while she stayed home spending my money." Jennifer stood abruptly, her face red with indignation. "Spending your money? I took care of our home, Michael. I was your wife for 15 years. And I was your provider for 15 years, he shot back, still laughing. "Now you want a retirement plan for that?" Judge Rebecca banged her gavel harder. "Mr. Johnson, control yourself, or I will have to remove you from the room." Something in her tone made Michael pause for a few seconds. There was a quality in the judge's voice that unsettled him in a way he couldn't explain. It was familiar, yet completely foreign. Jennifer continued her testimony, now with a choked voice. She spoke about how Michael had changed after the company began to grow, how he had become cold and distant, how he seemed ashamed of his humble beginnings. "He forgot where he came from," she said into the microphone. "Forgot that he was once poor too, that he also needed help. Now he acts like he's better than everyone." Michael laughed again, but this time the sound was more forced, less natural. "Poor? I was never poor. My parents always gave me everything I needed." Judge Rebecca leaned forward, and Michael noticed she was watching him with an almost unsettling intensity. "Mr. Johnson," she said, glancing at some papers on her desk, "could you tell us a little about your childhood? Where were you born?" Attorney David seemed confused by the question. "Your Honor, I don't see how this relates to the division of assets. I ask the questions here, Counselor." The judge's voice was sharp. "Mr. Johnson?" Michael shrugged, still smirking. "Born right here in Chicago, traditional family, upper middle class. My father had a small construction supply business. Nothing special." "And your grandparents? Did you know your paternal grandparents?" The question caught Michael off guard. He blinked a few times, his smile faltering. My grandparents. No, they passed when I was very young." "Why do you ask?" The judge didn't answer right away. Instead, she made a note on her papers and then looked straight at him. "Mr. Johnson, do you have any siblings?" "No, I'm an only child. Look, with all due respect, what does this have to do with—" "Just answer the questions I ask." Her voice was firm, but Michael detected something more. There was a restrained emotion there, as if each of his answers caused some kind of impact on her. Dear listener, if you're enjoying the story, take a moment to like and especially subscribe to the channel. It helps us a lot as we're just starting out. Now, continuing. Jennifer watched as the judge turned her attention to Michael, trying to understand where this line of questioning was going. Her anger was beginning to give way to curiosity. "Your Honor," said Attorney David, "I'd like to understand the relevance of these questions to the divorce proceedings." Judge Rebecca ignored the lawyer and kept her eyes on Michael, who now seemed less at ease. His laughter had completely stopped. "Mr. Johnson, do you remember your first day of school?" Why should I remember that? It was over 30 years ago." Most people remember significant moments from childhood. First day of school, birthdays, family vacations. Do you recall any of those moments? Michael ran a hand through his hair, suddenly agitated. There was something about these questions that made him uncomfortable in a way he couldn't explain. I remember some things. It's normal, right? Everyone has fragmented memories from childhood. And your parents? How did they meet your wife when you first started dating? Michael paused, a confused expression crossing his face. They liked her, obviously. But how was the first meeting? Do you remember introducing her to them? Jennifer leaned forward, now completely absorbed in the conversation. She had been married to Michael for 15 years, but realized she'd never given much thought to these questions. Michael stammered. It was natural. They met, they talked. Why does this matter? The judge made a few more notes before turning to Jennifer. Mrs. Johnson, did you know your ex-husband's parents? Yes, of course. Mrs. Barbara and Mr. William, wonderful people, but she hesitated. But what? Well, I always found it strange how different they were from Michael. He was much more closed off, more reserved. They were warm, welcoming people, and physically too. Michael didn't look much like them. Michael abruptly stood up from his chair. What are you implying? Of course I look like my parents. This is ridiculous. The judge watched him rise, and for a moment, her face revealed an emotion she couldn't fully hide. It was as if she was seeing something that moved her deeply. Mr. Johnson, please sit down. I have some information I'd like to share with you. Information? What information? Michael was visibly agitated now, his voice rising. This is a divorce hearing, not an interrogation about my family. The judge opened a folder on her desk and pulled out some documents. 3 weeks ago, after I received the case files, something caught my attention. You have a very distinctive laugh, Mr. Johnson. A laugh I recognized immediately. What? Michael looked around as if searching for an exit. That's absurd, everyone laughs. Not everyone laughs the same way. The judge's voice was softer now, almost maternal. And not everyone tries to hide what they feel behind a nervous laugh when they're scared or uncomfortable. Jennifer watched with wide eyes. Something very strange was happening in that courtroom, something far beyond a simple division of assets. Mr. Johnson, the judge continued, after I heard you laugh during that first hearing a month ago, I did some research. I found interesting things about your birth certificate. My birth certificate. Michael's voice came out higher than usual. What about my birth certificate? The judge handed him a document. This is a copy of your original birth certificate, Mr. Johnson. I'd like you to look at it carefully and tell me if you notice anything unusual. Michael took the paper with trembling hands. His eyes scanned the document quickly, then returned to read it more slowly. His expression gradually shifted from confusion to something close to panic. This can't be right. There must be some mistake. What does it say, Michael? Asked Jennifer, now standing as well. It says I wasn't registered until I was 3 years old. His voice was barely a whisper. But that doesn't make sense. Why would anyone wait 3 years to register a child? Judge Rebecca took a deep breath as if preparing for something very difficult. Because you were adopted, Mr. Johnson, and your adoptive parents took 3 years to finalize all the paperwork. The silence that followed was absolute. Michael stared at the document in his hands as if it might explode at any moment. Jennifer covered her mouth, shocked. That's a lie, Michael said, but his voice lacked conviction. My parents would have told me. They would have said something. Parents don't always tell, Mr. Johnson. Sometimes they think it's better for the child not to know. Sometimes they're afraid of losing their child's love. Michael sank back into his chair, still staring at the birth certificate. But if I was adopted, it means that somewhere out there you have a biological family, biological parents, and possibly siblings. Jennifer moved closer to Michael, her earlier anger replaced by genuine concern. Even after all the strain in their relationship, seeing him so vulnerable stirred a protective instinct in her. Your Honor, said Attorney David, who had remained silent throughout the revelation, while this is certainly shocking, I don't see how it relates to the divorce proceedings. Judge Rebecca looked at the lawyer, then turned her gaze back to Michael. It relates because there's more information Mr. Johnson needs to know. Information that could completely change the course of this case. Michael raised his head slowly. What? What other information? The judge hesitated for a moment, and again, that restrained emotion flickered across her face. Mr. Johnson, when I first saw you in this courtroom, I had a very strange feeling. Your laugh, your gestures, the way you speak when you're nervous, it all felt too familiar to be a coincidence. What are you saying? I looked into your adoption records. I discovered you were placed for adoption alongside your twin sister in 1995, when you were just 6 months old. Michael's world seemed to collapse. He tried to stand, but his legs wouldn't obey. Twin sister? You were separated during the adoption process. You went to the Johnson family, and your sister went to the Taylor family. The name hit Michael like a punch to the gut. He looked at the nameplate on the judge's desk. Judge Rebecca Taylor. No, it can't be. The judge rose slowly, and Michael could see tears forming in her eyes. I spent 30 years looking for you, Michael, or 30 years knowing I had a brother somewhere in the world, hoping our paths would cross one day. Jennifer covered her face with her hands, completely stunned by the revelation. Attorney David opened and closed his mouth several times, unable to form a word. I'm your twin sister, Michael. Tears now streamed freely down the judge's face, and I've waited my whole life to meet you. Dear listener, if you're enjoying the story, don't forget to like and subscribe to the channel. It helps us a lot as we're just starting out. Now back to the story. Michael tried to process the information, but his mind seemed to have completely frozen. He looked at the judge, his sister, trying to find similarities that now seemed obvious. The shape of her eyes, the line of her chin, even the way she tied her hair, reminded him of someone he saw in the mirror every day. How did you find out? His voice came out hoarse, almost inaudible. Rebecca wiped her tears with the back of her hand, trying to regain her professional composure, but failing completely. My adoptive parents told me the truth when I turned 18. They said I had a twin brother but didn't know where you'd gone. Since then, I've been searching. First casually, then more systematically when I became a judge and had access to more resources. But why didn't you never reach out to you directly? Rebecca anticipated the question. Because I didn't know your name. I only knew you existed somewhere. But when I saw your name in the case files, something caught my attention. Johnson. It was too common a last name to be a clue. But when I saw you in person, when I heard your laugh. Michael vaguely remembered having recurring nightmares as a child about being lost, about searching for someone he couldn't find. Nightmares that stopped when he learned to control his emotions, to never show vulnerability. I always knew something was missing, he murmured, but I could never figure out what. Jennifer, who had remained silent, absorbing everything, slowly stepped closer. Michael, this explains so much. Your difficulty connecting with people, the way you always keep everyone at a distance. No. Michael stood abruptly, his voice rising again. It explains nothing. This doesn't change who I am. It doesn't change the fact that you want half of what I built with my own hands. Rebecca watched her brother's reaction with a mix of sadness and understanding. Michael, please calm down. I know this is a lot to take in. Take in? He laughed, but this time there was no humor in the sound. Finding out my whole life was a lie? That I have a sister who's a judge presiding over my divorce? That's beyond bizarre. It's impossible. I've recused myself from the case, Rebecca said quickly. Obviously, I can't oversee my own brother's divorce proceedings. Brother? Michael repeated the word as if it were foreign in his mouth. I don't even know if I can believe this. How do I know it's not some kind of scam? Some way to... Michael, Jennifer said, her voice firmer now. Look at her, really look. How can you not see? Michael forced himself to look directly at Rebecca. It was like looking at a feminine version of himself. The same brown eyes, the same brow line, even the small scar on his chin from childhood was there in the same place. My God, he whispered, finally letting reality sink in. It's true. Rebecca took a hesitant step toward him. Can I hug you? I know we're practically strangers, but... Michael hesitated for a moment, then nodded. When Rebecca hugged him, he felt something he hadn't in years, a sense of wholeness, as if a missing part of him had finally returned to its place. I'm so sorry, Rebecca murmured in his ear. I'm sorry we lost so much time. Me too, Michael replied, surprising himself with his own words. I didn't even know I missed you, but now I realize I always have. They pulled apart, both with tears in their eyes. Jennifer watched the scene with a mix of emotion and confusion about where this left the divorce proceedings. What happens now? She asked. Rebecca stepped back behind the desk, trying to regain her professional demeanor. Now I need to step away from this case. I'll request that another judge take over. But before that, she looked at Michael. There are some things you need to know about our biological family. Michael, who was still trying to process having a sister, felt his stomach twist. Our biological family, are they still alive? Our mother is alive, yes. And she's been waiting for this moment just as much as I have. What about our father? Rebecca's face hardened. Our father? Well, that's a complicated story. He was the one who gave us up for adoption. He abandoned us? Not exactly. Rebecca glanced at some papers on her desk. When I found out about you, I also started investigating our past. Our mother, Mary, was only 17 when we were born. Our father, Edward, was married to another woman. Michael felt as if someone had punched him in the gut. We were the result of an affair. It was more complicated than that. According to the records I could find, and especially from what our mother told me when I met her 5 years ago, our father promised he would leave his wife for her. But when he found out she was having twins, he got scared of the scandal. Jennifer listened in silence, trying to imagine how she would feel learning something like this about her own origins. Did he force our mother to give us up? He didn't exactly force her, but he made it clear that if she kept us, she'd be alone. A 17-year-old girl with no family to support her, 2 babies. She didn't have much choice. Michael slumped heavily into a chair, his head in his hands. Where is she now, our mother? She lives here in Chicago, works as a seamstress in a small shop in Queens. She never married, never had other children. She spent her whole life hoping one day she could find us. Does she want to meet us? She lives for that, Rebecca answered with a sad smile. When I finally found her and introduced myself, she cried for 3 days straight. She said she always knew we'd find each other someday. Michael lifted his head, his eyes red with emotion. What about our father, Edward? He died 10 years ago. Cancer. But he left a letter. A letter. Rebecca opened a drawer and pulled out a yellowed envelope. He left this with our mother, asking her to give it to us if she ever found us. Mary gave it to me when we met, but she said it was meant for you too, once I found you. Michael stared at the envelope as if it were a bomb about to explode. What does it say? I've read it, but I think you should too. It's an explanation and an apology. Michael reached out with a trembling hand and took the envelope. The paper was yellowed with age, and his name was written in an unfamiliar handwriting. To Michael and Rebecca, my children. He opened the envelope slowly and unfolded the letter. He began to read in a low voice. My dear children, if you're reading this letter, it means Mary managed to find you. I hope that happens, but I fear I won't be alive to apologize in person. There are no words to describe the regret I've carried for over 30 years. When Mary told me she was pregnant with twins, I was desperate. I was young, cowardly, and more worried about my reputation than doing what was right. I convinced Mary it would be better for you to have families who could give you everything I couldn't. I told her I was doing it out of love for you, but the truth is, I did it out of fear. Fear of taking responsibility, fear of others' judgment, fear of changing my life. All these years, not a single day passed without me thinking of you. I even hired investigators to try to find you, but I always backed out at the last moment. What right did I have to come into your lives after abandoning you, I know I can't undo what I did, but I want you to know that I loved you from the moment I learned of your existence. My cowardice kept me from showing that love, but it was always there. Mary is an extraordinary woman. She loved you every day for these 3 decades and deserves all the happiness you can give her. Please don't judge her for the decision we made. She was just a child, and the pressure I put on her was unfair. I hope you've had happy lives and that your adoptive families gave you all the love I failed to provide. I also hope that one day you can forgive me. With all my love and regret, Edward Wilson, your father. Michael finished reading with tears streaming down his face. Jennifer had moved closer and was reading over his shoulder, also emotional. He regretted it, Michael murmured. Yes, said Rebecca, and our mother told me he tried to find us many times but always gave up. He said he didn't deserve our forgiveness. And you? Do you forgive him? Rebecca thought for a moment. It took me a long time. I was so angry when I learned the truth, but after talking a lot with our mother, after understanding the circumstances, I realized holding on to anger was only hurting me. He was young, scared, and made a terrible decision. But in the end, he gave us the chance to have families who loved us. Michael folded the letter carefully and put it in his pocket. Our adoptive parents. Do you think they knew we were siblings? No, Rebecca replied. When I spoke with our mother, she told me she insisted we be separated. She didn't want us to go to the same family because she thought it would be easier for the adoptive families to raise us if they didn't know we had a sibling somewhere. So, my parents, Barbara and William, they never knew. Probably not. And that explains why they never told you about the adoption. Maybe they thought it would be easier for you to grow up believing you were their biological son. Jennifer, who had remained silent throughout the conversation, finally spoke. Michael, this explains so much about you. Your difficulty forming deep bonds, the way you protect yourself emotionally. Michael looked at her, and for the first time in years, he truly saw her. Not as an opponent in a legal battle, but as the woman who had tried to love him for 15 years, even when he couldn't fully return it. Jennifer, I'm sorry. For everything. You don't have to apologize for something you didn't know. But I need to apologize for how I treated you, for shutting you out, for being selfish and insensitive. Rebecca watched their interaction with interest. Even as a judge who had seen many couples in divorce proceedings, there was something about these two that suggested love hadn't completely died. Maybe you both need time to process all this before moving forward with the divorce, she suggested. The divorce, Michael repeated, as if he'd completely forgotten why they were there. Jennifer, after all this, do you still want a divorce? Jennifer hesitated, studying his face. I don't know, Michael. This changes so much about who you are, about why our marriage was the way it was. But it doesn't erase 15 years of problems. I know. But maybe, now that I know why I always felt incomplete, why I was always afraid to truly connect with someone, maybe we can try again. It's not that simple. I know it's not. But is it worth trying? Before Jennifer could answer, someone knocked on the courtroom door. Rebecca allowed them to enter, and a clerk appeared. Your Honor, there's a woman outside who says she's related to Mr. Johnson. She's very agitated and said she needs to speak with him urgently, Jennifer said. Michael and Rebecca exchanged glances. I think our mother found out, Rebecca said. I called her last night to tell her I'd found you. She must have come here. Michael felt a mix of anxiety and anticipation. She's here? Do you want to meet her? Rebecca asked gently. Michael looked at Jennifer, who nodded encouragingly. I think so. After 30 years, I guess it's time. Rebecca asked the clerk to bring the woman in. A few minutes later, the door opened again, and a woman around 50 entered the room. She was petite, with graying hair tied in a simple ponytail, modest but clean clothes, and eyes that were an older version of Michael and Rebecca's. Mary, Rebecca said, standing and walking toward her. Mary hugged Rebecca quickly, but her eyes were fixed on Michael. She approached slowly, as if afraid he might disappear if she moved too suddenly. My boy, she whispered, reaching out a trembling hand to touch his face. My boy. Michael felt his legs weaken. There was something in her voice, in her touch, that awakened memories he didn't even know he had. Memories from before the adoption, before his adoptive parents, memories of a soft voice singing to him. Mom. The word left his mouth before he could think. Mary began to cry, covering her face with her hands. Forgive me, my son. Forgive me for not fighting harder for you. Forgive me for letting them separate us. Michael, surprising himself, pulled her into an embrace. It was strange to hug a woman who was both a stranger and the most familiar person in the world. You don't have to apologize, he said, his voice choked. You were just a child yourself. But you were my babies. I should have found a way. You gave us families who loved us, Rebecca said, joining the hug, and now we're all together. Dear listener, if you're enjoying the story, take a moment to like and especially subscribe to the channel. It helps us a lot as we're just starting out. Now, continuing, Jennifer watched the family reunion with tears in her eyes. It was impossible not to be moved seeing three people who had spent their whole lives searching for each other finally come together. Mary stepped back slightly and studied Michael carefully. You grew up so handsome, my son, and I know you've become a successful man. I always knew you two would be special. How did you know? Because even as babies you were determined. Michael, you always cried when they separated you from Rebecca, and Rebecca always tried to calm you when you cried. You protected each other from the cradle. Michael looked at Rebecca, trying to imagine what it would have been like to grow up with her, to have a sister to share childhood fears and joys. And you, Mary turned to Jennifer, you must be Michael's wife. Ex-wife, Jennifer corrected quickly. We're getting divorced. Mary looked saddened. May I ask why? Jennifer glanced at Michael, unsure how to explain. It's complicated. We grew in different directions. He became very closed off and I needed more emotional connection. Mary nodded understandingly. Michael was always like that, even as a baby. He protected himself, closed off when he felt threatened, but deep down he felt everything intensely. How could you know that? He was just a baby when you knew him. A mother knows, my dear, and for these 30 years not a day went by that I didn't wonder how you both were, what kind of people you'd become. She looked at Michael tenderly. I imagine you've spent your whole life feeling incomplete, like something important was missing. Michael nodded, emotional. Exactly. I could never explain what it was, but I always felt like there was a hole inside me. And now? How do you feel now? Michael thought for a moment, looking at Rebecca and then at Mary. I feel like I finally understand who I am. Like the pieces of a puzzle I didn't even know I was putting together have finally clicked into place. Mary smiled through her tears. Then it was worth it. All the suffering, all the waiting. It was worth it to see this moment. Rebecca wiped her eyes and returned to her position behind the desk. Well, now that we're all here, I need to formalize a few things. First, as I said, I'll recuse myself from presiding over this case. Second, I'd like to suggest that you, she looked at Michael and Jennifer, take some time to process everything that happened today before moving forward with the divorce. You're right, said Jennifer. I think we need time to understand how all this changes things. Michael agreed. Jennifer, no matter what we decide about our marriage, I want you to know I'm sorry. For all the years I couldn't be the husband you deserved. Now I understand why, but that doesn't excuse the pain I caused. I know you tried, Michael. I always knew there was something you couldn't express. At least now we understand what it was. Mary watched their conversation with maternal interest. Can I give my opinion, even if I'm an outsider in this situation? You're not an outsider, Michael said quickly. You're our mother. Your opinion matters. You two still love each other. That's obvious to anyone watching. The problem wasn't a lack of love, it was a lack of connection. Now that Michael understands why he was always emotionally closed off, maybe you can try to rebuild that connection. But 15 years of problems don't disappear overnight, said Jennifer. Of course not, Mary agreed. But true love is worth fighting for, And you have something many couples don't. You now know exactly what the problem is. Rebecca smiled, admiring Mary's wisdom. Our mother is right. You have a real chance to start over, now with complete honesty between you. Michael looked at Jennifer with a vulnerability she hadn't seen in years. Jennifer, I know I don't have the right to ask this after everything, but would you be willing to try again? Not like we were before, but building something new based on who we really are. Jennifer studied his face for a long moment. There was something different in his eyes, an openness that wasn't there before. It won't be easy, she finally said. I know. And it'll take time, a lot of time. I understand. And you'll have to really open up to me. No more hiding behind that facade where everything's always fine. I promise I'll try. And now that I have Rebecca and Mary to help me understand who I really am, I think I can be the person you always needed me to be. Jennifer took a deep breath. All right then. Let's try. But slowly. And if it doesn't work, at least we'll know we truly tried this time, Michael finished. Mary clapped softly, emotional. How wonderful! A family reunited and a marriage saved all in one day. Rebecca laughed. Well, technically I'm still presiding over a divorce hearing, so I'll officially request a temporary suspension of the case. You'll have 6 months to decide whether to proceed with the divorce or not. 6 months, Michael repeated. I think that's enough time to figure out if we can rebuild this. And during those 6 months, Mary said, I want to get to know both of you better. I want to know everything about your lives. I want to be part of the family you've built. And so do I, added Rebecca. I have 30 years of sisterly conversations to catch up on. Michael smiled, and this time there was no nervousness in his laughter. You know what? For the first time in my life, I feel like I truly have a complete family. 2 weeks later, Michael was sitting in the kitchen of the house he had shared with Jennifer, having breakfast together for the first time in months. He had moved back in, but they decided they would sleep in separate rooms until they felt ready to share the same space again. How was therapy yesterday? Jennifer asked, pouring him more coffee. Hard, Michael admitted. The therapist made me talk about things I'd never put into words before, about how I always felt like I didn't belong anywhere, like I was an imposter in my own life. And how do you feel talking about it? Scared, but also relieved. It's like I can finally stop pretending everything's okay all the time. Jennifer smiled. You have no idea how good it is to hear you say that. For years I felt like I was married to an edited version of you. And you, how are you feeling about all this? Confused but hopeful. She sat beside him. Last night, while you were at therapy, I kept thinking about how different our lives could have been if we'd known this from the start. Do you think it would have made a difference? I think so. At least I would have understood why you shut down when I tried to get close. I would have been more patient, more understanding. Don't blame yourself, Jennifer. You were more patient than I deserved. The phone rang, interrupting their conversation. It was Rebecca. Hi, sis, Michael answered, still getting used to the word. Hi. Do you have time today? Mary wants to cook for us. She said she wants to make the favorite dish you both ate as babies. She remembers what we ate as babies? Apparently, she wrote everything down in a notebook. Said she wanted to remember every detail to tell you when she found you. Michael felt his chest tighten with emotion. Of course we'll come, 7 o'clock. Perfect. And Michael? Yeah? Thank you. Thank you for what? For existing. For giving me the chance to have a brother. I didn't realize how incomplete my life was until I found you. Michael smiled, feeling tears well up in his eyes. I'm the one who should thank you. For finding me. For searching for me all these years. After they hung up, Jennifer watched him. You're crying, she said. But it wasn't an accusation. It was almost a celebration. I am, he admitted. And you know what's strangest? I don't feel like stopping or pretending I'm not emotional. That's the Michael I fell in love with, she said softly. The man who wasn't afraid to feel. Do you remember him? Because I don't remember being that way. You were like that in the beginning. When we first met, you could still be vulnerable. But as the years passed, you closed yourself off more and more. Like I was protecting myself from something I didn't even know existed. Exactly. They sat in silence for a moment, each lost in their own thoughts. Jennifer, Michael finally said, I want you to know I'm not doing this just because I found out I was adopted. I'm doing it because I realized I almost lost the best thing that ever happened to me out of fear. I know, and that's why I'm willing to try again. That evening, in Mary's small house in Queens, the four of them gathered around a simple but plentiful table. Mary had prepared pasta with plain tomato sauce and shredded chicken, apparently the first solid food Michael and Rebecca had eaten as babies. You used to eat this like it was the most delicious thing in the world, Mary said, serving large portions for everyone. Michael always finished first and tried to take food from Rebecca's plate. Some things never change, Rebecca teased. Even now he eats way too fast. It's true, Jennifer confirmed. I always thought he ate like someone was going to steal his food. That's exactly it, Mary said. Even as babies, you both had this sense that good things could be taken from you at any moment. And then they really were, Michael murmured. But now you're back, Mary said, holding both her children's hands, and this time no one will separate you. During dinner, Mary shared stories about their first months of life. How Michael would always cry when he woke up and didn't see Rebecca. How Rebecca always shared everything with Michael. How they communicated in a way only they understood. You had your own language, she said, little babbles that only made sense between the two of you. I used to sit and watch you talk for hours. We still do that, Rebecca said, laughing. Yesterday, when we were talking about Michael, we came to the same conclusions at the same time, without even planning it. That's the twin connection, Mary explained. You were born together, shared the same space for 9 months. That bond never completely fades. After dinner, while Mary and Jennifer washed the dishes and talked about recipes, Michael and Rebecca sat on the small porch of the house. Can I ask you something? Michael said. Of course. Do you ever feel like our lives were wasted? Like we lost 30 years we should have spent together? Rebecca thought for a moment. Sometimes, yes. Especially when I think about all the big moments we missed. Graduations, relationships, marriages, struggles we could have faced together. But I also think maybe we needed to go through everything we did to become the people we are now. How so? Well, if we'd grown up together, maybe I wouldn't have become a judge. Maybe you wouldn't have become a businessman. Maybe we wouldn't have developed the independence and strength we had to build. Do you think it was worth it? I don't think it's up to us to decide if it was worth it or not. It happened. Now it's up to us to decide what we do with the time we have left. And what do you want to do? I want to know my brother. I want to learn everything about you. Your dreams, your fears, your joys. I want to be there for the big moments still to come. And I want to help you and Jennifer rebuild your marriage. Why is that important to you? Because I see how you look at each other. Even with all the problems, there's still love there. And you deserve to be happy, Michael. You deserve a full family, wife, sister, mother, and maybe someday kids. The mention of kids made Michael pause. Kids. Jennifer and I tried for years. We never could. I always thought it was a medical issue. But now I wonder if it was emotional. If I wasn't ready to be a father because I didn't even know who I really was. Maybe now things will be different. Maybe. They sat in silence for a few minutes, listening to Mary and Jennifer's laughter from the kitchen. You know what moves me the most? Michael said. What? Hearing our mother laugh. There's something in her laugh that, I don't know, makes me feel at home in a way I never have before. I get it. It's like a body memory, something you feel in your heart, not your mind. Exactly. Michael? Yeah? Thank you for not giving up, for letting all this happen even when you were scared. Thank you for looking for me, for not giving up on finding me. Just then, Mary stepped out onto the porch. Jennifer left, she said. She mentioned you both agreed to take some time apart to process the day. That's true, confirmed Michael. We're trying not to force things. Very wise. Mary sat between her two children. Can I tell you something? Of course. All these years, every time I saw twins on the street, my heart ached. I'd wonder if you still looked alike, if you'd developed similar personalities or completely different ones. And now that you know us, Rebecca asked, now I see you're both alike and completely unique. Michael has a sensitive heart he learned to protect. Rebecca has an inner strength she uses to protect others. You complement each other perfectly. What were we like when we were little? Michael asked. You were like two halves of the same person. Michael was more impulsive, but Rebecca always calmed him down. Rebecca was more cautious, but Michael always encouraged her to be braver. Together, you were perfect. And now? Are we still complementary? Mary smiled. More than ever. You spent 30 years developing the qualities the other lacked. Now that you're together again, you're complete individuals, but even better when you're side by side. 3 months later, Michael stood at the altar of the small chapel where he and Jennifer had married 15 years earlier. But this time, it wasn't for a wedding. It was for a vow renewal, a ceremony they'd decided on to mark the fresh start of their relationship. Rebecca stood beside him as his best woman, and Mary sat in the front row, moved to tears. On the other side, Jennifer walked toward him, radiant in a simple yet elegant dress. When she reached the altar, Michael took her hands. 15 years ago, he said, I promised to love, honor, and respect you. I kept 2 of those promises, but I failed at the most important one, loving you completely, without reservations, without fear. Jennifer smiled through her tears. And I promised to accept you as you were in joy and sorrow. I kept the first part, but I failed to accept your limitations with patience and understanding. Today, Michael continued, I promise again to love you. But this time, I promise to love with my heart wide open. No fear, no barriers. I promise to share with you not just my successes, but also my insecurities and fears. And I promise to accept not just who you are, but to support you in becoming who you want to be. I promise patience with your journey, understanding for your struggles, and faith in our love. The priest smiled. 15 years ago, you married hoping love would be enough. Today, you're marrying knowing love is just the beginning. True happiness comes from the courage to be vulnerable, the willingness to grow together, and the faith that fighting for what we love is worth it. Yes, they said in unison. Then, by the power vested in me, I now pronounce you husband and wife. Again. The priest chuckled. You may kiss the bride. Again. When Michael kissed Jennifer, he felt something he hadn't in years, absolute wholeness. Not just because he had a wife he loved, but because he finally knew who he was and where he came from. The reception was small, only close family and a few dear friends, but to Michael, it was perfect. His sister was there, his mother was there, and his wife stood by his side, truly by his side, for the first time in years. During the celebration, Mary approached him. May I dance with my son? She asked. It'd be an honor. As they danced, Mary whispered in his ear, Your adoptive father, William, would have been so proud of you today. You knew him? Not personally, but when you were about 5, he sought me out. Michael stopped dancing. What? He found out about the adoption. I don't know how. And he came to me. I wanted to know if I wanted to meet you. And why didn't you come? Because he asked me a question that changed everything. He asked, do you want to meet him because it's better for him or because it's better for you? And I had to admit it was better for me. Then he said, when it's better for him, you'll know. And when the time is right, you'll meet. Michael felt tears streaming down his face. Did he know we'd meet one day? He believed it. And he said when it happened, it would be because you were ready to learn your true story without it destroying the person he and Barbara helped you become. He was right. Yes, he was. You've become a good man, Michael. Flawed, like all of us, but good. And now you have the chance to become even better. Later that evening, Michael and Jennifer were on the porch of their home, watching the stars. What are you thinking about? Jennifer asked. I'm thinking about how funny fate is. If I hadn't filed for divorce, I never would have found out about Rebecca. If I hadn't found out about Rebecca, I never would have met Mary. And if I hadn't met them, maybe I'd never have understood why I always felt incomplete. And we'd never have had the chance to truly start over. Exactly. It's like we had to almost lose each other to really find one another. And now? What comes next? Michael smiled. Now we live. Without fear, without barriers, with our family complete and our love renewed. Sounds perfect? It does. For the first time in my life, everything feels perfect, and it really did. Michael had found not only his biological family, but also the way back to the woman he loved. He'd discovered that the emptiness he'd always felt wasn't because something was wrong with him, but because there were people missing from his life. A year later, when Jennifer announced she was pregnant, Michael wasn't surprised. It was as if his body had finally allowed new life to grow within their family, because now he knew what it truly meant to belong to one. The end. Now tell us what you thought of this story. Do you believe Michael made the right decision giving his marriage a second chance? Share your opinion in the comments. If this story touched your heart, don't forget to like and subscribe to the channel so you won't miss other heartfelt stories like this one.